All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Interface. This week we're with Tim Daines. Welcome, Tim. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have
Lovely
you
to
on.
have you, man.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, Tim, you're in data and AI development, right? That's essentially your title and your role. And we wanted to bring you on this week because we really want to focus on AI and talk a bit about how that's kind of disrupting the landscape. How do you currently feel about the landscape of AI? Where we're at the moment and where you see things currently going.
Great question, first of all, and great to talk about this sort of important time and really great to be alive in this sort of period of where we are at the moment. I think to sum it all up, there's a lot of FOMO going on at the moment. People feeling like I'm going to lose my job, AI is going to take over, and what do I do? A lot of people that I talk to at the moment around in the product community, the design community, is I'm trying to upskill myself now so I can stay ahead of Gen Zs and the alpha generation coming through. Where I think it's actually going is very much relatable to when I started out getting into the space of product design. Before it was called product design, it was webmasters. When we used to do web pages, is that actually at the moment I relate to where we are is everyone wants the web page, which is like the LLM. But actually what everyone needs is the web application, which is the content management system. So we haven't quite got to, what are the intelligent knowledge content management systems behind all of this that we need to design to really bring AI to its full potential?
Yeah, I think it's a good point there because the whole topic on LLMs, right? It feels like that's probably where we are currently. And do you feel like that is the answer? Do you feel like that's the do you think that's like the future? We'll continue going down that track?
I think that there needs to be an understanding of what is an LLM at the end of the day. Yes, it is a piece of AI. It's a machine that looks at language, but it's only a tool at the end of the day. It's a feature in the bigger picture of a product. So I think it's a great starting point for people to start getting involved with how do I work with a machine? How does this work? And that's what it is. It is just a machine. It's a guessing machine at the end of the day. Goes out, fishes on the internet and pulls information in when you write it a prompt. And then you can plug it into other applications and start to design new features with how it gets used. And then you're in control of it. I think where there is a huge gap at the moment is that people don't think about scale and enterprise. So I look at things like, I've got this ChatGTP and I've got N8N and I've got automation going on here. It's like, but all you've done is you've just automated a workflow. You've not brought any intelligence into it. You've not thought about actually enterprise level, how we're trying to scale that intelligence and how we're trying to use it to go into business workflows for people to optimize and improve themselves. And then all these words about buzzy words of productivity gains and improving performance. But then how do I actually then design this into my product where it's not going to break because I've just built it on ChatGTP? And it should be actually, I need to treat it as a tool. And then I can just plug into anything. So Anthropic or ChatGTP or Perplexity or Gemini. I shouldn't be restricted and build my products around one LLM. That's quite a high risk. And we've seen it. ChatGTP goes down, it overloads because everyone hammers it, especially when America wakes up. And these things aren't fault tolerant at the moment. Yeah.
Interesting. It sounds to me like, if I'm kind of like a layperson, that the LLM is just like a fancy kind of like search engine summarizer. But what we really need in businesses is something which is embedded, that is almost kind of like invisible, that is kind of connecting all of the dots within the business and providing us with kind of insights. Yeah. If that is the case, how does one like go about tackling that task or even kind of bringing it into an organization?
I always go back to, now I'm showing my age, kind of like when everyone's trying to build a web page. It's like, before we got to the .com bubble burst, what was going on? Everyone was throwing money at building web pages. It's the new thing. But the underlying, if I could relate it to today, is the underlying thing that people didn't realize they were doing until we sort of saw Amazon come through, and no one really understood what Amazon doing. Oh, it's just a bookshop online. What it was doing was creating this thing called e-commerce. We haven't seen, well, what is this creating, this equivalent to e-commerce today? Which actually, if you think about how that works today, is actually e-commerce is built into the back office of a lot of businesses now. And any company you go to, it's pretty standard that they've pretty much got a website, but they've also got a content management system now, which is built into their business process. Where I would look at today is actually taking a step back and thinking about, well, on that sort of perspective of, well, I'm trying to build a content management system for my website and my business, I take the same approach here as like, what am I trying to do with building AI into my business? What am I trying to do? Am I trying to reduce a load of manual tasks that prevent all my very talented people from actually going and doing the things that I need them to grow my business? Or is it that actually I need to solve a lot of onboarding issues with customers who come into my business, where a lot of this can be done through automation or through augmentation. And then I can release my staff to go and actually work on some of the more thorny problems in the business that AI can't do at the moment. And that's how I would approach it, is taking that step back about, I'm trying to grow a business with my people, and make sure the talent I've hired is actually giving me back on return in terms of the value that I'm looking for here. And I think at the moment, a lot of people are getting distracted with the FOMO of my job's going to go away. And actually, if I can reduce the amount of OPEX spend on a certain area, then I'm going to grow my business. I think that's actually not going to work. I think actually, if you release your talented people and you put them somewhere else in your business to grow your business, then that's where you see the true value of actually, how do I apply this in my business? How does AI work for me?
So just to kind of go back a little bit. So you mentioned that, it's more than just, using it as like an LLM, like feature, which is like, like a search engine kind of thing. What companies actually need is a CMS. Devil's advocate, someone listening to this business owner might say, well, we've had CMSs for years, right? So like, what does AI CMS look like?
Yeah.
Like, what value is it going to bring kind of to the table? And then what would it actually allow a team to do?
I think one of the big things that I've sort of seen through the pandemic, we're several years out of it now, is there was a huge psychology behavior change. There were people that decided to retire because they're like, you know what, I've had enough now. The world's changed. I don't want to reskill myself and go, but they had a lot of skill in themselves. And there's now this, I feel this is the void that has appeared. And then there was people who used to work in sort of labor jobs now, and then they've become, oh, well, I can do content and I'll use this AI stuff to become a content creator. I think one of the things that I see now is that one of the biggest challenges that businesses have is knowledge bleed. People leave. And that knowledge might live in a content management system. It might live in Word docs. It might live in Excel docs. It might live in their head when they never got around to documenting it. But the challenge for businesses is actually, well, people move on and they leave. And actually, I've got to start over again. And then I've wasted a lot of money because it's cost to relearn. I can't grow. So that content management system is going to have to be something that gets designed, which is intelligent, which is I need to document everything from my employees in a knowledge management system. And then where, say, the LLM comes in is, well, it really doesn't matter if it's structured or unstructured data. As long as I put rules around my prompt, my system prompt that I use to drive my LLM, because I'm controlling it, I mitigate it hallucinating, but I've got access to internal knowledge, the wall garden of my business's data that I can now use, and I can spin faster to get out all the insights with the LLM. And then that new person coming into the job doesn't have to start all over again. They can start querying an intelligent system, maybe through Slack or maybe through Teams, and they can access, maybe it's a different variety of sources, but now I've got something that translates very quickly and goes, well, actually, I'm looking for this information on a customer that I started just a week ago, but I want to know their history about 6 months ago, I can now have that surfaced because it's come out of the previous person's job role, and now it's in the system there. And that's the distinct difference that I sort of see of like, actually, that's the new content management system. It's an intelligent knowledge management system enabled through that conversation with an LLM, or you want to call it AI, but you're not automating, you're augmentating. And therefore AI and human can work together now with knowledge.
That's really interesting. How that use case has just like got my brain just like ticking over, because I'm kind of imagining, you know, I get hired somewhere, I'm using all the systems, say I'm using, you know, kind of like Word, and I've got Gemini embedded in it, or like Sheets or whatever. And effectively, if I'm like reading between the lines, you could almost create a clone of me, like digitally.
Yeah.
Right. So all of my thoughts are going onto the screen. They're getting inputted, like the way that I calculate things, the way that I interpret information from the business or from the customers, like how I just kind of think about problems and the solutions that I come up with. If I was to leave in a few years or whatever, you've still got me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like in my head, that's how I'm kind of seeing it. It's like we've got all these virtual versions of, you know, current and ex-employees that are just in this system. And then I guess like if someone else kind of comes in, they can kind of just extract from that kind of like pool of data, you know, and I guess it's doing its own kind of summary and whatever, and it's just spitting out like the best result of all of this kind of info. That's pretty cool. I haven't actually kind of thought about it in that way before.
And we're not quite there yet, because one of the biggest challenges around this at the moment is that, I mean, the way I kind of describe it is the scene from Tron Legacy, where, you know, Sam Flynn kneels down and he puts his, you know, the glass comes up, he puts his hand on, he takes a copy, and Clue comes out. So it's a direct copy of him. But now that's the system. So that's effectively his LLM. But he's put his knowledge inside it as well, which is basically what we call is a system prompt today. The thing is that a system prompt needs to be updated with you putting information into it. So as the film goes, Sam Flynn keeps giving his knowledge to Clue, but then suddenly Clue gets corrupt. And he gets corrupt because of contaminated data that comes into him. So the issue there is that there wasn't any memory management on his knowledge that was going on there, and like actually there wasn't any guardrails. So if you compare that to today, we call it hallucination. So if you don't control the LLM with what it's allowed to do and what it's not allowed to do, it's going to go and do its own little thing, and it's going to start creating synthetic data that's going to mislead people, or it's going to go corrupt or something like that. It's not going to do obviously what Clue did, but what is missing here in this layer, and I think this is the kind of the intelligent knowledge management piece here, is actually we've got to design memory systems now, a bit like so, you know, you've got, when we used to have hard drives, disks, you know, and then you had RAM, we've now got to take that and virtualize that. And actually, how do I version my memories in a system? Because it's not the same as versioning a document. That's the premise of it. But actually, we've got long-term memories, we've got short-term memories, and we've got in-the-moment memories, core memories. We need to design those systems to capture that kind of knowledge. And because at the end of the day, the LLM is just basic. It's a bit like a mechanical function. Go get that information because I've asked you to go and do it. And so that user prompt goes and queries that, and then it has to go and route to get that knowledge based on that questionnaire. But so that doesn't exist today. And yes, there is some memory in these systems. It's only for the chat though. That's the front end. It's not the back end piece, the enterprise piece, that which is why I always go back to the web page and the web application. We have the web page today in the LLM, which is the front facing chat. But that application, the memory-based systems, they don't exist. No one's really invented a persistent system that operates like the human brain, where we want to sort of recall memories from 10 years ago and bring that knowledge into the way that you've just described that there, of actually how do I design a prompt to go and retrieve those memories to educate and mentor my younger people coming in so they can accelerate their learning, and then I can keep learning and then keep building on that knowledge, and then that's a valuable asset now to a company because knowledge is stored in the business. You're growing the business, and you're upskilling faster by people working in a way that's augmenting with a machine rather than it taking over their job.
Yeah, and then also onboarding as well, right? Like anyone new coming into the company has just like a wealth of information. It kind of just like it accelerates their onboarding into the organization. But I think it would also like alleviate a lot of pressure on existing employees or managers to then offload their knowledge onto new people coming in as well. But I guess like what's central to all of that is just having that memory system kind of in play.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about what you're saying there, Tim, is like this is a very specific problem that we're trying to solve, right? And I think the challenge that I have is that a lot of people aren't thinking this, like a lot of businesses aren't thinking this way, right? I think they're thinking almost a little bit too basic in the sense of, oh, how can AI like, reduce my costs or reduce my headcount, whatever it might be, right? But it's like, we should really be focusing on these core problems, right? Like you said, like memory, learning, new people onboarding, all these kind of things. How do you think businesses can be better at like strategizing how they can use AI and these different problems that they could be solving?
You've just mentioned the key word there, strategy. When anything new technology comes out, where we've had like, the internet and then mobile apps, cloud, everyone's like, it's the latest toy. I'll chase the toy. And if I've been seen doing it because it's the most easable, tangible thing to roll into the business, then clearly I'm showing that I'm accelerating my company. Generally, what I've seen is complete failure because it's like, well, I've spent a load of money on an experiment. I've not really gone back and thought about, well, what's the strategy behind the back of this? Where am I trying to get to in 5 years? Because it's a new infrastructure. So I do see, and of course, why would they not? And everyone's gone nuts around since ChatGPT's come out, and we've got Claude, and now we've got Perplexity, and now we've got Gemini, and then we've got people then building applications over the top of that, like Lovable as an example. And people are simply sort of just building these things. But actually, if we think, in a business, the first thing is it's just like any kind of business problem. What's going on in my business here? Well, actually, I've got revenue pressures. I might not need to be saving money in OPEX. I might be an extraordinary business that, I can actually cover that in assets. That covers my overhead. Some businesses aren't that fortunate though. They're like, well, actually my revenues are getting drained by my OPEX. And I've got, I always have to end up getting rid of my staff, which I don't want to do because that's what's going to grow my business because it's the talent. So I think taking a big step back about actually, what's the questions that if I put a CEO hat on, what are the questions that I constantly getting asked, which is, how am I growing my company? How am I making it, valuable back to my shareholders and my investors, whether it's public or private? How am I moving my staff forward where actually I get them to start using this technology in their day-to-day? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time as a business? Because I might not be attractive to investors. I might not be attractive to shareholders. I might not be attractive to my customers, and I'll start to shrink. And actually, because it is a huge investment, AI here, and one of the things that I think people don't realize is that actually this is not linear projects anymore. It's non-linear. LLMs will go off and do what they want, and they will ping any API that they want, and they will use as much prompting and tokening as they want to achieve what you've asked it to do. You can't budget for that. You've got to think about these things. So you've got unsynchronized cost models coming in now. So strategically, you're going to have to think about that in terms of, well, I've kind of got a little rogue child going off here and I can't control it. And they're having a bit of a tantrum. The world that we live in at the moment in that digital space is that it's linear. We know what's going to go in and we know what's going to come out. It doesn't work that way in AI. So having that strategic conversation and having that all up front, what's the life cycle of where we want to get to in the next 5 years, and how we're going to bring the organization forward has to be asked first, rather than just going, well, I'm just going to use ChatGPT and I'm just going to plug it in here and show that I'm using AI. yes, it's okay for experimentation. Is this going to work for our business? But let's, take it back to basics. It's MBA 101. What's the business use case? How am I going to, it's just another piece of technology at the end of the day. It's just advanced mathematics with data going through it. And it's not a magic wand. It may move things faster, but it's no different from actually just building a piece of software that's trying to accelerate your business.
And do you think individuals actually working on these projects and features going forward, i.e. the product managers, product designers, and people of this world, do you think they're going to have to think a bit differently now about how they build features and how they use LLMs going forward?
Yeah, so I suppose there's different buckets here, which is I'm building AI for my product that I'm already got out in the market for customers, and then I need to look at ways in product operations or design operations for using AI in how my staff work, because I need to be delivering ROI faster or something like that. So I think, if I'll put my sort of product manager sort of hat on here, and my team of designers and my team of devs and everything, is that actually what's the most heat that I get from the business? It's discovery. Where's my ROI on this? You didn't experiment, nothing came out of it. It's not adding AI. Why am I paying for that kind of thing? We obviously know why we do it. It's about de-risking building something at scale, and that's the value that it brings in. But in the executive camp, it's, that's just burnt money. And I want to see a return on investment. I want to see that feature, and I want to see people clicking on it, and I want to see the ARR go up. So I think there is definitely some thought here as a product manager about what am I trying, again, strategy, what am I trying to accelerate here that moves not just my product forward, where I've already got maybe quite a few million users or something like that on the actual product, but also moves my team forward to be, yes, more productive, but actually is able to move faster with experimentation or something like that, reduce that window of cost, where I'm always constantly scrutinized for it. And if it gets to a point, well, I've got to let headcount go or something like that. But how do I accelerate that kind of machine, but not compromise the quality of what I'm trying to deliver for, which is, the customer at the end of the day of my product, but also the quality of my team, where they don't rush things and they don't become lazy and they rely on the LLM and just go, oh, I just shoved all this data in here and it did this. Wow, I've moved faster, but not questioning, but is that bias? Have you put things in there you shouldn't have done? Have you, why has that made you go faster? That kind of, so actually thinking about that operational perspective of where do I want my team to be and how do I want to do delivery in a different way? That's the skills that I think are sort of missing at the moment with we're in this very sort of FOMO world of I must be seen using AI and I must be seen using these ChatGPT tools and Claude tools. Park the sort of restrictions at the moment with some of that, but actually I'm getting pressure to be seen using these things. But actually stop, take a step back. What are you trying to achieve? Where are you trying to get your team to, so that you make the business sort of more valuable, rather than just be, I use OpenAI now. Look what we've done. That's a very tactical, very quick sort of way of showing that I can see you doing it, but what's the overall return on the investment of you doing that? Now, have you moved faster? I do see some people definitely in the dev camp, they are moving faster and they're accelerating. Absolutely. I do see in the prototyping, well, like Figma. I mean, I've been playing around with Figma and I'm blown away by, I can just, if I write a detailed prompt with quality insights, I get a pretty good design. But what I've accelerated there is really like, I can now do 10 experiments rather than one from sketching. That's an ROI investment that I can do multiple testing now, and I can speed up what's the right thing to build. That's how I think about those kind of things. Not look, I moved faster and I did it and I churned out my work faster. It's more that bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve here, and that's where I think that's the skill that's missing. I see at the moment, and I'm sure some people are thinking this way, but I don't really see it because of all the FOMO going on at the moment. So yeah,
benchmarking, right? So I've listened to everything that you're saying, and I'm kind of wondering, should instead of focusing on using the AI tools and FOMO and making sure they're using the right ones or being seen to use AI, should companies be focusing their attention more on benchmarking of how long does it take us to get from A to B today?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how long does it take us to achieve this objective or build a project of this size, that size, whatever, and then start adopting the tools and then measuring? Because I kind of feel like it's like that gold rush thing, right? Like everyone's running towards this and like trying to kind of get it now and be seen to be using it, but then it starts to blur the lines because you're so embedded in the tools now and you've been using it for like 18, 24 months that you forget where you were, and then you're in the same kind of issue where it's like, well, what is the ROI on this? Like, is it really saving us anything or not? Do you know what I mean? Because it very quickly just becomes normal. Like that's just the way the company works, and you've got no idea of or memory of like where you were before. Do you think companies should be doing more like benchmarking up front and then kind of go into the tools, or I guess diving straight in?
I think it's a balance. I suppose going on your sort of like gold rush example, it's actually the thinking is where you need to get to is not buying the shovel but selling the shovel because there's gold out there. I see a lot of buying shovels at the moment, but that's not scalable, and that's it's not going to return on my investment. I think that balance really is that actually there's a couple of challenges in businesses at the moment, especially traditional businesses, that I'll park the tech ones at the moment, is that actually we've still got traditional companies that are still trying to get used to digital sort of web page apps, things like that. You can't just slap in an LLM on a system. You've got legacy-based systems. You've got things that are still written in C#, stuff like that. Got your alternative integrations all going all over the place that have been manually coded, and people are just still working in that world of complexity. And then now you're throwing in this AI stuff, and everyone's going, well, I'm still trying to do the job that you're asking me to do at the moment. Now you're asking me to do something else. So there's that box. So I think to bring them along is like, well, give them access to ChatGPT, perhaps contain it as an experiment and actually work out and do a bit of a test and use the principles that we know from design and product. We would go out and do an experiment. We would have a hypothesis. Do people work differently? Do people see a performance improvement? Do people see time savings? And actually capture that data and use our own medicine, I suppose, really, is actually go and test it on ourselves. We preach the processes and go, why do people not do discovery the way that we want to do? Just go do it on ourselves. That do a discovery piece on, will ChatGPT or Claude or will Gemini help us? It may not, actually. And I think everyone just goes, oh, well, it faster thing that goes faster, like the horse. Therefore, it's going to go faster for us, isn't it? Not necessarily, because you've got to learn about that benchmarking, about what's the right thing to do. And then you get the tech companies, which are literally living in pools of innovation. It's like, well, let's try this, let's try that. And I think there's this sort of consolidation that needs to happen about, well, what do we learn from each one of these? And actually, is this something where we can, well, that's the route that we go down. That was the best performing one, again, to your point, like benchmarking the time. Or is it that actually, is there lessons learned from each one of these things where we can actually start to bring something in a sort of more scalable level, where actually, this is where we saw time on task or time in motion or something like that, saw improvements, but it was only for certain situations. So we wouldn't, I see certain people go, you can use it for everything and it will solve everything. It's not going to do that. There's complexities within businesses where AI is just not going to help. It's going to actually cause more problems than actually helping. It's going to add more time on, because you've got to learn it, you've got to apply it, you've got to then work out, has it actually made me go faster? And there's like the simple sort of like the onboarding task. Oh yeah, it analysed this spreadsheet very quickly for me, and that normally takes me a morning to do that. It's done it very quickly, and I had a quick check and that. So I think experiments is the key to this, of actually getting to that benchmarking piece. And I think it goes back to that point where we were talking about strategy. It's no different from getting to a business case. What are we trying to measure? What does success look like? What are the metrics behind that? Because eventually it will attach to a KPI that people are going to have to report on. So I think having that having that line in the sand, where are we before to where are we after, and how have we made that leap, is important to track, and we should apply our own sort of methods of how we do customer research and experimentation and discovery. Like, we capture all these metrics to prove that, by putting this button here rather than putting this button here, we see a faster conversion, and therefore that translates into a metric. So we've improved the time to a sale or something like that. We should do the same thing with using these tools as well, on that. So again, I don't know if people do it that way. I don't know about what you see where you are at the moment. Where are people using these tools? Are they thinking about that? Are they measuring where they were to, like, actually performancing about, actually, instead of doing a 4-week cycle of a sprint, I can now do this in 2. I don't know. What are your thoughts on sort of what you see at the moment?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not seeing enough of what you mentioned there about treating the new AI features that we're building as an experiment and measuring the success of it over a period of time, or in a closed group or something like that. I think that's where I feel we're just moving, or I'm seeing companies or people just moving so fast to just get it in without actually seeing, has it done anything for us, or have we improved? Has productivity improved? Has the speed of delivery improved? So yeah, I agree. And I like that thought, Tim, that we should treat it like any other feature, right? Anything that we're doing with AI, anything that we're integrating AI into our processes, whatever we're doing. I think that's a great shout. I'd like to see more of it personally. Don't know about you, Jay.
No, similar. Like, there's a rush to set up, like departments that, you've got like a complete AI department looking at AI in kind of different ways, and then asking teams, okay, like, how can AI make your workflow more efficient? How can we integrate AI into the tools? But yeah, I mean, I don't hear kind of a lot about, kind of benchmarking, like, where are we today without AI? Where do we hope to get to with AI, that kind of thing? But one piece that has occurred to me now, since you've been talking, is around like critical thinking. I'm kind of wondering, like, should we as individuals and companies be investing less in, kind of rapid experimentation with the tools and more in critical thinking? Like, because or hiring people that are kind of strong critical thinkers, or at least teaching your existing org how to critically, like, assess kind of data, etc. Because you even made an example of, AI summarized the numbers in the spreadsheet, and then, you gave it a once over, it looked good, and then it's good to go. But we also know that AI hallucinates, and without that critical thinking capability, someone will just trust exactly what is being spat out by the AI. We see it with ChatGPT all the time. You ask it something, run these numbers or give me a plan for this. Then it's like, hold on a minute, I mentioned nothing about that line here. Like, what's that doing there? Like, that's not the original budget or whatever. So that's like, I do wonder where the investment should actually be going. Should we be giving the workforce those raw skills that are needed to really make AI effective, or should we just be diving straight in and use the tools first, I guess?
Yeah. So I think if you're trying to bring people with you, and there's skepticism about AI. So I mean, the thing I hear the most is that at the moment is that, like, when web pages came out, like for the printing industry, magazine industry, oh, my job's gone. And then Steve Jobs bought out desktop publishing. Oh, look, I've just created a new business model. So they learnt a skill which was not build a website, which was learn how to digitize your physical content. And Steve gave them a tool. The tool today is the thing, and the critical on the path of critical thinking and problem solving is learn how to system prompt. It goes back to our conversation around in the intelligent knowledge management system. In order for that knowledge to become really powerful in an organization where you can sort of talk to, let's say it's an agent, where it's got access to memories and it's got access to other tooling and everything like that, that has to be through a well-crafted system prompt. So I would say that problem-solving piece and that critical thinking piece is actually, first of all, understanding what is a system prompt and what does it do, because it's actually the heart of an agentic system, which helps us build our agent. That's effectively its brain that you're building, and you're giving it then guardrails and rules to go, right, okay, well, if this was me, as you mentioned earlier, it's you that you're designing here for other people to use. What will I allow it to do, and what will I not allow it to do? What's the step-by-step process that I would normally take? What are the actual things that this is actually a hard no? This is the critical path that needs to be followed, because the output that we're looking for is this. Because if that output doesn't come that way, then we can't hit that ROI that we're trying to do. Because the whole point of this here is actually to, a number of things. Maybe it's about moving faster. Maybe it's about getting better quality. Maybe it's about, this takes us weeks to do. We're trying to sort of mitigate that down and do more in the space that we've got, rather than just do one thing once. So bring that thinking into, how do we think about constructing a system prompt that allows us to do that? But one thing with this here is that, again, a system prompt is a product. You don't just build it once and then hope it works. You have to keep iterating this thing like a product. Like, oh, I've learned a little bit of something now. Here, it did this. I didn't want it to do that. I want it to do this. One of the things might be is the fact that it gets into a little bit of a spin. And this is the point about I was making earlier, is that agentic-based systems, when they haven't got any direction, they'll go off and find or make up an answer for you, because it's like, well, you asked me to do this and I'm bringing it back to you, but and sometimes actually, if you change it, go, well, that was actually wrong. It will come back and confess and say, and I've asked it, said, oh, actually, I did make that up because you only wanted that and I gave it to you. So, and this is the skill that's missing. Actually, I see it more in the sort of younger generation who have grown into digital, who have grown, they're not digital natives. Digital is a part of their life. And, these things that we were educated about, bias in data, security in data, you don't upload any kind of personal information into these things. And I see people upload personal information into these things. That goes into the big wide world web. And it's stuff you're not supposed to be putting in there. So I do see these things that fall down at the moment with common sense and that critical thinking and the problem solving. It's like, actually, we have a duty of care, for using this kind of thing. So I think the skill is about, how do I build this tool, a system prompt, and then apply the problem solving around that, because that's the mechanism that I want to use, because I'm going to put information into it and it's going to output something for me. But what do I want it to do? How's that going to help? And that's the skill that really needs emphasis on. And I sort of take it back to my information architecture days. When I started out in design, I was an information architect. It's the things I learned weren't go wireframe and draw the wireframes in Balsamic, if you ever remember Balsamic. Yeah. It was like, show me your portfolio. Oh, this is the wireframe I made. And it's like, actually, what I got challenged on the hardest moment is that, how did you use mental models? How did you take the mental model and turn it into a task? And then how did you group that with affinity mapping? And then how did you define that into a set of card activities, which was open or closed, to then define a task and then decide on, well, how do I build the navigation menu? That was the problem solving and the critical thinking. So if I take those methods, that's your system prompt today, which is, you build all those methods in there because you're trying to solve a problem with this and use that as a tool. So that's where I see this space at the moment in terms of that, which unfortunately what I see is people just ask questions and then they just kind of like, oh, build this prompt, but they don't like think and iterate about, well, is it doing what I want it to do? What's the bigger picture of it? So I think there's definitely, I mean, I spend a lot of time at the moment, I call it meta prompting. And I've basically taken the product lifecycle and I'm breaking it down and I'm prompting it. I'm going, can I do, I've just done about one for marketing insights. It's a real pain in the backside. How do I go to say, I want to go build this feature? I need a ton of market insight around it in terms of where are my competitors? What are my users saying? I've got to do my total addressable market, my serviceable addressable market, my actual market that I can hit within a population. That takes time. So if you could prompt that, and I've sort of built this at the moment to accelerate that and just, I'll feed it the information, as long as it's in confidential areas, that information. I've now accelerated that piece of work to drive, what I want is to drive a conversation to go, should we build this, should we not? Rather than actually, oh, well, we built this and it didn't work. And we spent a load of weeks experimenting and that kind of thing. So that kind of problem solving is how I see using these tools. Yeah.
And Tim, I'm just thinking about this because, I think what we're saying here is that people need to get better at prompting. They need to understand how the system works. But we're in a space where this is so new. Like, where are the experts? Where are these courses? How are people going to learn about these things? And we're expecting people to learn themselves, do some self-learning, spend time. That takes time, right?
Yeah.
And I know companies are trying to find ways that they can get that knowledge into their teams and get better at prompting. Some companies have like an AI team, or some companies have an AI kind of like integrated expert in the team that kind of helps people. Yeah. In your opinion, what do you think is the best way that we can level up our teams to be top prompters?
So one of the things I spend a lot of time now focusing on is product operations. I do a bit of the doing now of actually building the product in Zibi, but what I see is we waste so much time faffing on its methodology wars, playbook wars. No, this is the way to do it. No, that is the way to do it. Product operations is still quite young, in my perspective. It was a bit. I think we're at the stage now where 10 years ago we were trying to persuade people, but go talk to your customer, go and get some data, and stop doing Field of Dreams. If we build it, we hope they come and pray. We're at that stage now with product operations, is that I think people are starting to see that, oh, actually, I see the value in talking to my customer now. I see the value in the fact that my products move faster, and if I talk to my customers better and I work backwards from them, I get a better product. That's the kind of mentality that we need to do now. We've done it for our forward-facing customers. We now need to bring that thinking internally to our teams and go, actually, let's work backwards from our workforce. Where do we need to improve operations within product and design, where actually we can start to educate them with perhaps maybe prompting, or actually, how do you treat prompt like it's a product, and actually structure it down, everything like that. The biggest mistakes that I've seen have been give it to the AI team, because the AI team doesn't know how to create products. They go and create you a technical solution, and they will, some of them are a little bit savvy about who's the end user, but they go, well, here's the end user. They type this in. But what we obviously bring to the party is, well, we bring empathy, and we bring the bits about how do people make decisions, their pain points, their needs, what are the opportunities here? There's a business piece, there's a customer piece. So just siloing this into an AI team isn't going to work. Perhaps where I've seen it work is actually have it's that Spotify model, which is your squads. Actually, you have a squad of AI people and designers and product people, but you bring them all together in a project. So actually, what you could do is if you're delivering a piece of work, and I would probably have a low risk feature or a low risk item on a product or something like that, do a parallel activity of actually let's look at product operations through this here. And that's something that I've done, which works really well, because you don't only have your agile process going on where you're actually doing agile delivery, but you also do postmortems and pre-mortems about, well, how do we want to work differently? Let's take those learnings in and put them into our playbook or our methodology. But now how could we accelerate even faster and go, well, actually, how do we take our playbooks and our templates and put them into a system prompt? And how do we start working with system prompts on maybe a feature line or something like that? And that is learning by doing. And then that's then something to showcase. And I think several years ago when I was over seeing a friend in Facebook, actually what they have is something called Best Practice Museum. And I thought, oh, what is this? And you go to an area which is near the cafeteria, and it's, here's what we've learned from a new piece of best practice by delivering a product. And they walk through what they actually did by doing that. And I thought that was brilliant, because that's then it's not like knowledge is contained within a team. It's now knowledge goes into a company, and it's not siloed. And so there's a playbook that came out at the end, and people could take the playbook, and then there was a champion on it, which was, if you're stuck and you want to talk to someone who's done this, go talk to them. And that's the kind of product operations piece that needs to start rolling out into businesses, where they learn by doing, and they learn from champions, leaders, coaches, and everything like that. And I see that work really, really well, rather than it being you must all go on this course and train, and you need to come back and you need to prompt and you need to be an expert at it. It just doesn't work that way, because we just don't retain all of that. You've got to apply it, and you've got to stick it into something. You've got to have a good, like, show me, don't tell me, show me it working, kind of thing. So that's where I see it work really, really well, instead of hiring. Let's just stick it in the AI camp and hope that they come out with something that we can all use.
I've heard an interview recently with this guy called Mo Gaudat. He's like an ex-chief business officer at Google X. He's written a few books on AI. And in his most recent interview, he said something along the lines of, AI is going to effectively replace CEOs, because it can make, and founders, mainly CEOs, because it can make much better business decisions. How do you feel about that, in terms of like that leadership layer being AI? Do you see that as a possibility?
I suppose the question is do we want the rise of the machines? Do we want that? I mean, our AI is only as powerful as the data that you give it, and how you tell it how to use that data. Without those things, and without those kind of like controlling mechanisms in there, then it's that saying that we have here, which is garbage in, garbage out. So yes, I think we will see teams that will start to probably shrink and go, well, actually, I don't need so many people to deliver this kind of thing. And you start seeing the company CEO of one, because they've got all these little AI things working around them, everything like that. And you're probably going to need teams that are going to have to be much bigger, because to solve the more complex problems, you're going to still need those size teams there. Will it replace CEOs? Will it replace C-suite? I think we'll see a transition, is what I think we'll see. I'm a big fan of looking at sort of like history of like where we've come from. So like, where have we come from in the last 100 years? So we never, what gets bashed around is co-founder and startups. Like if you look 100 years ago, so you started a business, basically, and you're a managing director. That's all you are. Like we've just fluffed up the sort of names and everything like that, and made it very buzzy. I'm a co-founder, CEO. I'm a CTO, co-founder. I'm 7-time founder, and all this. I think it's very much going to be about how does an executive team move with AI? How do they augment with AI? And does that change the role of a CEO? Does the CEO become another title or something like that? At the end of the day, you've still got to intervene with AI. No matter how perfect you think you've designed the system. I'll go back to my Tron example, where I know it was fictitious, but the system collapsed because Flynn lost control of Clue, and Clue went rogue, And basically Flynn had to go off because he was the CEO of the system. Only in the end did he have to destroy the system in order to get power back to it. So I think there's there is this kind of, actually, is that the right thing to do, to replace the CEO with AI? Because who's in control of the AI then? Who's watching the AI? And now we get into this challenge of, well, we've got natural data in the world now, which is the information on the internet that we put out there as human beings. We're going to get to a world, and we're already starting to get into a world, and we're not actually tagging this very well, is actually we've got synthetic data from machines. What made the decision, the machine or the human? So all of this has to come into that kind of thinking. I also think that there might be companies that, you could have an AI running a company. I mean, we built something that, we can build agents and spin them up in an hour because we've built the proper enterprise architecture. All our knowledge lives in that system. So effectively anyone could use that, and we're not in control of it. So effectively, who's running the business now? We haven't got to it where it's making decisions about investments and things like that, but it could get there one day where actually, I've got my agent CFO, and it's now doing all my books because it looks at our accounting systems because we've integrated it. That is a future that is possible and likely. But again, it's humans. Like, how much control do we want to lose, and do we want the machines to start taking over? So we've got to use some common sense, I think, with it.
Yeah, Tim, just wanted to talk to you a bit about the perception of reality and AI. Because, I think for people like us that work in the industry, we kind of understand a lot more than most about how these systems work, how content's generated, and all these kind of things. Do you think there's any risks for what our perception of reality is going forward? Because, you see it all the time. I've seen my friends, my mom, she doesn't realize that there was like a reel that was AI generated. She believed that actually happened, you know? And it's the same with, like, when you're speaking to someone on an email. Is that person actually messaging you, or has it just been an AI generated email? Do you think there's any risks there with the future in terms of how we see things going forward?
Totally. We're not in control of our data at the moment. I was talking to someone in Japan the other week, and they're a CPO, and at the moment they've got that, I need to upskill in this. I need to be seen. I need to know what this has an impact on my job. That's where their heads are at. But she said something interesting, which was, but I've got another worry. All my juniors just keep shoving data into this thing, and they're not questioning whether they should have done it in the first place or not. And then they're not checking the bias that comes out, and they're taking it for gospel, and they're not double checking whether that was the right thing. So our discussions about hallucinations earlier, and is that really right? That's the danger at the moment, is that, if I'm honest, since we've hyperscaled into cloud over the last 15 years, I think we've actually become lazy, and it's allowed us to do plug and play at scale, and we're not questioning things. That's dangerous for us, because if we don't question stuff, then before we know it, an incident happens, and we get an equivalent of a phishing situation. So, I mean, I think a lot of, another learning area at the moment is that I don't think people realize is that you can actually inject queries into machine learning models, and you can change the mind, the AI, how the AI works, and you can basically overwrite the code and branch it off. So things like, I've seen instances in Facebook where people have gone and injected something into Facebook login details and go, hey, look, there's something wrong with your account. You need to reset your password. It's really written well because it's copied what has been done, and it actually puts down at facebook.com, because we're all designed to check. Well, we're all supposed to check the email because of the phishing. It could be at something. But it's got really smart now, and this reality check is that we now need to be more savvy, which is, even though it's got AI, even though it's got at facebook.com, it's like, well, would Facebook ever come to you and say, your account's been compromised, you need to reset your password? Probably not. what they would probably say first of all is actually, you need to go through the support ticket, you need to log the ticket, and then you need to go to one of our agents to actually solve this for you. And that's kind of what would actually happen. So, but we've become quite lazy and we've become quite trusting of systems. Oh yeah, I'll just give my details. So account compromised. So that world exists now and it is happening. And there is I think this is the downsides of these tools. They're convenient. Things go faster. I look cool. It's just not always the case where that's actually the right thing to do. Have you checked? It's basic security, IP compliance checking that I think it's the boring thing. It's the unsexy thing. We don't want to do it. But actually, it's the most sensible thing to do, because when something does happen and it happens, then actually in the end you'll be questioned. But why didn't you do that? Why didn't you check it? You've had the training. You're supposed to do these things. So that's my worry with it all at the moment. And actually, I think we need to bring back responsibility around data usage and how data is being used, and basics of questioning stuff. Ethics needs to really come. Responsibility needs to come into this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that we're all kind of custodians of this going forward as well, right? I think, and this is where I think the learning and the way that we train teams of the operations as well to kind of think about, is this ethical? Is this something that's going to cause any issues for someone going forward or whatever it might be, right? So yeah, there's a real responsibility for people working in the industry, building these products, building these services, right, to kind of really think about these things.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked in healthcare quite a lot, and the first thing that goes to think is that actually one of the big criteria when designing healthcare system is, are we going to harm the patient? Because if you harm the patient, you harm yourself. Because basically, not only is the patient suffering, but you're suffering because now you've got to go and give treatment back, but you're also suffering because you harm the patient. So you're going to get challenged on that. The same thing happens with anything that we produce, even though, it's e-commerce, what's going to happen? Are you harming someone? Are you putting someone in a very difficult situation where you're bankrupting them, or where you're making them fall into a horrible habit? Yes, there's a business agenda. We need to make money. But actually, there needs to be a line of, well, we can still make money, but be responsible with it and not harm the people that we're designing for. Because obviously that doesn't lead to any advantage to anyone, because if you harm someone, they're going to stop and everything like that. So it's a bit of taking a step back and having a thought for a minute. And I think, as you said, it's going so fast, we don't get time to think, and we just need to be seen doing, and get AI happening because I need to be seen doing it, kind of thing from the top. And actually, as sad as it sounds, when you start going, well, what about responsibility and what about ethics? That's something money. Yeah, okay, so when you put that in your process, but I want to see, are we doing AI? Is it happening? Are we going faster? Show me the money. And that's kind of the sort of reality that we live in. So it's up to us to make sure that we're baking in those responsibilities and making sure that actually, we go back and answer the executive questions. And yes, they have an awareness of, well-being and welfare. They've got that because they have to be seen doing that as well. But actually, it's not going to be the top agenda, because that's your job to go do that, really. And I think I would say that to designers and product managers now. It's actually, don't let that drift. I know we're busy. I know we've got to get features out the door and move faster, but don't let these things slide, where actually at the end of the day, you will be accountable and if things go wrong. So put it in and bake it in as good practice.
I agree. And, it's actually quite frightening how trusting we've become kind of with AI. Kind of just believing what goes into it, and also believing how it's going to be used by other people as well. That said, where do you see the future kind of going with this now?
Yeah.
In the next kind of few years, because obviously it's accelerating at unprecedented pace. So, what's your predictions?
So I go back to what's the big problem in the world at the moment in terms of where a traditional business is at. Actually, I always say to people, look at the S&P 500. when you look at the S&P 500, who are the top performers? Well, it's the tech companies. Who are the lower ones? Well, it's these like industrialism type companies that like, they're making cars, or they're making tooling, or they're selling products, foods, and things like that. There's a huge gap at the moment. So I think one of the future things at the moment is actually how do you bridge sort of traditional businesses that are sort of on this journey of getting to, well, what is AI, to, oh, well, now I know what AI is, and oh, now I'm using AI. So I think it's all going to be about actually how do we get to systems, architectural systems that take unstructured data and actually put them into memory-based systems. So I spend a lot of time at the moment, and quite interestingly, looking at Anthropic at the moment about what they're doing. Everyone goes, oh, well, that's Claude. I'm like, no, but that's the top bit. That's the bit that you see as a customer and as a user. Go take a look at the guts that they're building. And it's the MCP work, this protocol that allows you to sort of talk and translate with the LLMs. But the other thing that's coming through quite strikingly now is actually the protocol that they're sort of building is actually you can talk to any system eventually, where actually it doesn't matter if you've got structured or unstructured data. You've got an architecture there that does it. So I see more enterprise systems shifting to a world where actually I don't need ETL and I don't need ELT systems where I've got to extract my data. I've got to translate it. I've got to load it then into a database. I don't need that anymore because why? I've got this MCP system now that can just go to unstructured data. I ask it to then load it into my new database structures for LLMs, which are called vector stores and ephemeral storage. That's my long-term memory. That's my short-term memory. All I've got to do is code the requirements for how do I version my memory? How do I do that kind of thing? And then I've just got to build a prompt system that accesses that. So it doesn't really matter that I've got to load a load of data in. Yes, it's still a database, but I don't have to extract, transform anymore. I can just go, well, I don't care if you're unstructured or structured. So I see businesses shifting towards more of rethinking their architecture on how do they approach data rather than actually building the AI solutions, because the AI solutions will always be there. The LLMs will. I think the LLMs are going to accelerate to a point where they're going to be very handy tools to, like, produce me a slide deck of 50 pages or 50 slides, and this is what I want it to look like. It will get that clever. Go and do me a trends analysis, go and do me a report, go and do all these graphs. We're already starting to see that stuff come out now, where you go, I want it to look like this. Some of the stuff that comes out of Claude is absolutely incredible. Now it's like, here's all my analysis. Go and do me a competitor analysis chart, and it'll plot it. So why do I need to sit in Excel? I don't need to, because I just gave it a bunch of unstructured data. So, and I gave it a prompt to give it a load of rules so it didn't hallucinate and go and get a load of random data, because I strictly told it not to do that. And I asked it to verify its source when it went out and said, oh, I made it up. Do you want it? No, take it out, that kind of thing. So that exists today. So I think we're now getting to a space where I solve this problem of, I don't have to do massive migration projects anymore of data, because it doesn't matter if it's unstructured. I think it's where I see it. It's a bit like it's Internet Explorer wars against Netscape is where we're at the moment. Who's going to win, OpenAI or Anthropic? And I think Anthropic is going to be a big one, because they're focusing on enterprise architecture, not just the sort of, well, let's just plug it into Azure and SharePoint and build the Copilot thing. They're really building a first principles ground up, a bit like a Windows operating system before we knew Windows existed. And I think that's what's going to come in the future. It's going to be more back end. And we're already seeing it with a lot of companies going, actually, we're now rolling out the MCP because I've got loads of unstructured data in my CRM systems. I haven't got time to hire people and do data entry because and then standardization's out the window, no governance. This fixes all that. We just don't have the mechanisms at the moment about, well, how do I roll that out? How do I operationalize it? And the technology is still relatively young. It's got quite a few security issues on it at the moment, but it's getting clever. It's getting better. And just like when Windows 98 came out and that kind of thing, when it had loads of holes in it, we bought the next one out and the next one out, and that's what's going to happen. So I do see a big shift of more the back end of this getting to, going back to the this is our content management system that we're building now. That's the web application that we're building. That's where I see it going. Yeah.
Yeah, just fascinating stuff, Tim. And I think we covered like a ton of topics, and my brain is just like physically like exploding now. I'm trying to kind of think about how we can kind of leverage kind of AI a lot more in our workflows, and especially around that whole ethics piece and governance piece around it as well. Like how are we using it? How should we be using all that kind of stuff? We could go on and on and on, and I think definitely we should have a kind of another chat about this kind of pretty soon too. As things are evolving at such like a strong pace as well. But for those listening, like if they want to find out more about the subjects that we've touched on today, more about yourself, like where can they find you?
So LinkedIn, they could all find me all on there. I actually do a Substack. So they can find me on my Substack. It's the Product AI Agent is what I've called it. I basically write about best practice and what's going on with product operations now, and how do you integrate AI into the way that you work. And I also do sort of the other side of it is here's how you approach an AI project if you're trying to build AI and actually get it into your product. So that's where they can find me, and send me a message, and we can always go from there. Yeah.
Amazing.
Thanks, Tim.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the time today. Yeah,
Thank you.
Great.